Hello everyone. I've just finished painting this group of Jacobite Highlanders, which are manufactured by Crann, and I'm also trying to film them on my new camera, which I'm finding the autofocus on it doesn't work quite so well as my older camera. So I've got it on a manual focus at the moment. So it's a bit of an experiment, but I wanted to talk to you about these figures, which I think are really lovely. This is my first foray into 18th century wargaming, really, and I was drawn to the Crann range because it is so diverse, really. There's a lot of European type armies in it, as well as the Highlanders themselves. There are the French forces who fought on the side of the Jacobites in the 1745 rebellion in particular, and the armies of the Duke of Cumberland, really. And it, as I say, it's my first sort of entry into the 18th century. But what appealed to me was that I can use those European type armies to kind of expand into the Minden range as well, which is compatible with this range. And so it's a sort of tentative steps, really. But obviously I've picked a little bit of a difficult subject to begin with, because you can't get around the perplexing problem of painting masses of tartan on the figures. So while I'm showing you these figures and messing around experimenting with my camera, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the attitude I have towards tartan, painting tartan for this particular period. So I'm just going to move these figures around and then bring each base to the fore. Focus a little bit better on that. And just give you a look at what I've done in the way of tartan, because I'm sort of quite pleased with the way it's turned out, the way they've turned out. But I have taken a few sort of shortcuts, I suppose you'd describe it as. Now, I'm not going to talk about the technique of painting tartan. I'm going to talk about the philosophy, my philosophy of painting tartan. So what I've come to the conclusion is that as wargamers, we tend to approach the subject of painting figures on the basis that they are models, model wargaming figures, which is quite a reasonable approach to take. You might think, oh, bit of a bend on the... That's a pain. It looks like it's going to snap off. To do something about that. Oh, that's put me off a bit, that. I don't like seeing things like that. It's a sign of imminent catastrophe. They never glue back on very satisfactorily, that. Don't know how that happened. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, models, we regard them as model soldiers. Now, what we tend to kind of expect then, as the quality of sculpts improve, is more and more detail on the figure, that we then have to take more and more care to paint accurately. Now, when it comes to tartan, tartan patterns can be so elaborate and have so many threads and of colour and thin stripes in them that it will defeat the best painter, and I'm certainly not one of those. So you have to make compromises, and the normal kind of approach that we take to all painting, whatever we're painting, is we'll do it to the best of our ability, and then satisfy ourselves that looking at it from a distance, it's going to look okay. On the wargaming table, it will look all right. Now, that is kind of more or less the approach I've taken with painting these figures, but what I want to suggest to you is that you should get out of the mindset of trying to paint as much detail as possible on them in an attempt to recreate the historical likeness or the actual appearance of something. I'm not explaining this very well, but don't get hung up, is what I'm trying to say, on trying to recreate the minutiae of the detail on the tartan, because you're never going to succeed. You're never going to do it. And also, don't get too hung up on trying to draw straight lines and accurate sort of right angles and so on, because on any item of clothing, those straight lines are going to crinkle and undulate over the clothing. So you're not in real life, you're not going to see straight lines. And the other thing as well is, don't get hung up on trying to recreate an historical pattern, at least not in this era. Later on, tartans did become more sort of formulated. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But in this period, there are very few records to actually describe what tartan was worn by what clans and so on. And there isn't any sort of prescription really on how to paint a figure, or how to represent a particular clan that, say, was present at Culloden, the Battle of Culloden. It was only really at the beginning of the 19th century that tartans did become more prescribed, and that is really all down to the way that tartan was politicised at the time of the Jacobite risings, in particular the 1745 rising, because the Jacobites certainly tried to dress their forces in tartan. This kind of depiction of a Jacobite warrior is highly romanticised. In reality, I'm sure a lot more of them would have been very ragged. A lot of them would have been almost naked, probably wearing a long shirt, and not very much else at all. Plaid was something of an expense, and it wouldn't have been worn, especially, it wouldn't have been worn by there would have been a considerable number of warriors who would have fought in their shirts and breeches and so on, but it was a definite aim of the Jacobite leaders to kind of create a tartan appearance, nevertheless, in their army, and this is why, after the rebellion was put down, the British or the English rather went to such lengths to forbid the wearing of tartan. And it was only really in the reign of George IV, when he visited Scotland in 1822, and Walter Scott actually created what was known as the tartan pageant for him, so that he could dress up in tartan, which was, of course, in itself was a huge irony, because he was his great uncle, the Duke of Cumberland, had actually led the forces at Cumberland, at Culloden, that had beaten the Jacobites in battle. But there you go. But it was only really Walter Scott that created this sort of notional, systematic depiction of tartans that were ascribed to certain clans and so on. So just as much as you don't have to worry too much on drawing lines particularly accurately, or drawing those minute, thin little slivers of different colours that you might see on a tartan design, you don't have to worry too much about historical accuracy. So what I've done is I've got 7 bases here. There's 28 figures in a pack, if you go for kind of one of the deals that Crann offer. I'm gonna have regiments of 24, or clans, or whatever you want to call them, of 24 figures. So what I've done is I've decided to give them a certain amount of uniformity, in that I'm going to paint each regiment with a base colour. And I've got 2 different base colours here. This is a base colour of Wargaming's Foundry Storm Green, and there's one other base with the same Storm Green colour, and then all the others have got a base colour of Wargaming's Foundry Terracotta. And Wargaming's Foundry are triads, so there are 3 layers of different coloured paint that I'm using as the base colour. And then over that, all I've done is I've used Warcolours transparent paints, which I've mentioned to you in the past. They do 20 different, see if I can get one inside the, there we go. So that's Warcolours. They're based in Cyprus, but if you purchase from them, you will literally receive your purchase in days. They are so efficient at sending you your order. But they do 20 different, what they call transparent colours. Now, what I found with a little bit of experimentation is that if you find colours that sort of match the colour, the background colour, they will kind of melt into one another and melt into the background. So you can use different horizontal and vertical stripes, different colours, and they overlap one another and kind of blend, which is the sort of effect you do get in tartans, of where two colours cross over one another. It produces a kind of third colour, and I found that did work to an extent using transparent colours, so I was quite pleased with that. I mean, it hasn't worked in every case. Certainly the darker transparent colours do tend to predominate, but you get things like the yellows and the whites and so on do tend to kind of show the background colour through them, and I was quite pleased with the overall effect. So that is how I'm going to proceed anyway. So yeah, all in all, I'm quite pleased with those. I've forgotten which one of these it was that had the dodgy musket, but I'm going to have to do something about that as soon as I've stopped filming. I think it was that guy there. And probably in the new year I'll make another order of Crann, and as my Anglo-Zulu War project comes to an end, this will probably be my next long-term project to replace it. Still got the Crimean War. Still haven't finished even the British side of the Crimean War. That's on my a constant presence on my worktop as well. But anyway, that's enough of me waffling. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this turns out all right. Playing around with the focus on the camera, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.